As you know, for years, I've been speaking at psychology conferences about how we need to take another look at the intro psych course. And then here I am, having an opportunity to take another look at the intro psych course.
Now you got to walk the walk.
I got to walk the walk. I'm like, holy cow, I really dug myself into a hole here.
You've just heard Sue Frantz from Highline College. I'm Garth Neufeld, and this is the Psych Sessions podcast. My podcast partner, Eric Landrum, had the opportunity to interview Sue for the second time on the Psych Sessions podcast at this year's annual conference on teaching in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in October 2022. Our thanks to STP and to Lindsay Maslin, the conference director for ACT, for making this recording possible. Now, please enjoy. If you're having trouble keeping your psych students engaged, then Macmillan Learning created Achieve for Psychology just for you. Macmillan Learning knows that student engagement is one of the biggest challenges you are facing, but Achieve for Psychology engages every student because it's about more than just what happens in the classroom. Students need to be engaged before and during and after class. Achieve helps students by offering exclusive digital content created by and for their authors, and a deep video collection with new, in-demand footage, plus all new goal setting and reflection surveys to help students set goals and provide you the means to check in with students. Preview how Achieve engages every student at macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. You can make an impact with PsychLearn. PsychLearn from the American Psychological Association is a complete all-digital instructional resource for psychology courses. PsychLearn's coverage of research methods and statistics drives deeper engagement than traditional printed textbooks, immersing students in multidimensional learning experiences with engaging content for practice and formative assessment. Structured around applied cognitive science, PsychLearn helps students gain confidence in their understanding of foundational concepts and build toward critical learning outcomes. Learn more about PsychLearn's course material for research methods and statistics for the behavioral sciences when you visit pl.apa.org/sessions. That's PL for PsychLearn, pl.apa.org/sessions. The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter.
Well, it's time for a very special episode. We haven't had a lot of return guests, but here we are with a part 2 episode with Sue Frantz. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Eric.
Sue, I think you're like episode 3 or 4. You are early in the sequence of Psych Sessions.
I probably am.
Yeah, and for our listeners, first, if I encourage you to go back, that would be like 2017 in the early years, but also just a really quick recap, Sue's really one of the reasons why, if not the reason why I got started. I think I had an early conversation with you about, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. And I think Garth had an independent conversation with you.
That's right.
And I think one of your gifts that we've talked about many times on and off the podcast world is that you've been a connector in your career, a connector of people. You've heard ideas in different places and you've connected them to either somebody at APA or somebody out there at NITOP or something. And so we'll always be grateful for you for that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I know that there was a point when I didn't even remember that conversation took place.
Well, I think you've probably done it so many times for so many people in your career. I wouldn't expect you to, and that's okay. So we are here at ACT 2022. It's really great to see our friends and our I don't know how people react to different terms. Our family, our tribe, our people. It's great to see them in person. And I actually want to be thankful of ACT and Lindsay Maslin for providing the space that we're in today. So, what's up with you? We are sort of post-pandemic. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I've been saying that for a while that I was pre-semi-retired, and then saying that I'm semi-retired, and now I'm saying that's all BS. I'm just differently employed.
Differently employed. And so your affiliation is Highline College it's Des Moines, right?
It is Des Moines.
It's not technically Seattle, but Seattle area.
Yeah.
But your home zip code is not in Washington State.
It is not in Washington State. I have gone from being fairly close to the Canadian border to being fairly close to the Mexican border.
Well, you're just the traveler.
I am. My first full-time teaching job was at New Mexico State University, Alamogordo, which is 70 miles from Las Cruces, which is where we live now. So when it became obvious that early retirement was on the table for us, it was an easy decision to go back to New Mexico.
So it's funny you say early retirement, because I think you're a lot like a lot of our other colleagues, and in that, I think the traditional use of the term retirement meant you stopped doing one's job, and then they traveled, or they tinkered in their garage, or they found hobbies, they took up ballroom dancing or whatever. I think we know so many colleagues who they might have stepped away from their job, or they did a bridge program, but they stay connected. I'm thinking of the Bill Buskiss, the Drew Appleby, the Paul Heddick, where in some ways they're just as involved non-institutionally, but they're just as involved with a publisher or with a project. And it strikes me that that's either where you are or where you're headed. Is that fair to say, or not so much?
Yeah, that's totally fair to say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my full-time teaching gig is coming to a close. So as far as my institution is concerned, yeah, it's retirement. That just means, no, I'm not working full-time for them anymore.
You're not getting the 100% of your former salary and benefits and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you're not retiring from the profession, your professional commitments.
I am not retiring from the profession. In fact, I think I'm doubling down.
Isn't that interesting?
So I've been reading quite a bit about retirement.
Please.
And essentially what the research says is that if you got something else to do, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And people have asked me, both in the profession and outside the profession, about what it's going to feel like to no longer have the identity as professor. And my response is, I still have that identity. I am still knee-deep in the teaching of psychology world, even though teaching students is no longer my primary responsibility.
Yeah, and I don't know that research. I haven't read it like you have, but the apocryphal stuff of there's so many, at least for men, I don't know it for women, a man will retire from the profession and 6 months later he's dead, right? Because his career, his identity was wrapped up in what he did. Once he stops doing that thing, doesn't have a sense of purpose or whatever, isn't going to work every day. And I have thought about in my own life, college professors are wrapped up so often into that's what they do. That's who they are. That's where their sense of importance comes from in their life. And I've thought a lot about that. And, even for me, I thought I've got 5 to 7 years left. Lately, I don't think that. And let's hope that no one at Boise State's listening to this podcast. I really think more now about 2 to 3 years left.
Yeah.
It's just and I don't know if your timeline has shortened or you've always had this timeline, but it's just getting harder and less rewarding.
Some things are definitely harder now. than they used to be. But I think one of the great things about our particular profession is that we don't have to give up the identity of professor. There are so many other things that we can do. We can write. We can still attend conferences. We can come to ACT, and no, you don't have to attend the sessions, but you can hang out and chat with people and be a mentor. So that identity doesn't have to go away.
No, I agree with you. This morning, there was an invited address by the STP president, followed by awards. And it's nice just to sit there and absorb it and hear a really learned address, and then watch our colleagues from all walks of higher ed, from high school through different college ranks, be awarded. And, I think for you and me, it's almost a been there, done that. We've both served as STP president, and it's nice to watch our colleagues win those awards. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit with you because I've got this thing in front of me, this handout from Flat World Publishing, if we could take a minute to talk about. And I think this is one of these things that you've kind of alluded to, that you can stay connected even if you're not a professor in the classroom. And so I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. Then I'd like to ask you about some of the details, and you can go as deep or not as you want to. So you have collaborated with Flat World Publishing to publish an intro psych textbook.
I have. Charles Stangor, formerly of the University of Maryland, who is retired, and I'm assuming he's happy in his retirement. I don't know, but he probably still has the identity of professor. He had taken this particular intro psych textbook through 3 editions, and he had decided that, he was pretty much done with textbook writing. So I was approached by Flat World. Actually, what happened is that Flat World contacted Doug Bernstein and said, "You know anybody?" And Doug very kindly gave him my name. So I was very happy to come in. I really appreciate Chuck Stangor's work to give me a solid base to start with. And I did the revisions, which started a long time ago, it feels like. And this is due to come out sometime in January.
So I have only 4,000 questions for you. We have
I'm ready.
Limited time. Well, but they should be fun. I mean, this is a hard thing. So I'm a little bit of an intro psych book geek. And I think if Regan were here, he would have just as many fun questions for you. So this is, and I say this with all love and respect, this is in this world what the geeks would call a retread, all right? And so, which is not meant disrespectfully at all. This is a hard thing to do, to take someone else's work and then reinvent it while updating it and putting it in your voice. And actually, Regan and I have had the geeky conversation. Is it easier to reinvent someone's voice and start with this running start, or is it easy to write something from scratch? Now, we've never done either, so we really can't answer that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
There have been times when I thought, I am so glad that I'm able to take this structure and revise it. And other times when I thought, I can see where writing from scratch would be easier. So I think it largely depends on the content. And there has been some content where I just deleted it and started over. In other cases, the content wasn't there in the first place, and so I had to create that from whole cloth. So neither are easy.
So was the Stangor book part of the Flat World ecosystem before you came along to update it?
It was.
And then was it part of another publisher's house before it went to Flat World?
I don't think it was.
Okay. So he wrote it for Flat World.
He did, and it started off as OER.
So it started out as OER, and it was given away freely, or with a small fee, or
it was given away freely, is my understanding. And then some editions ago, I don't know the history.
Yeah.
Some editions ago, it went to a paid. Flat World is digital first, so the digital copy is $35.95, And when students purchase that, everybody gets access to the digital. And if students want the hard copy, it's an additional $25.
Yeah, which is, depending on how familiar our listeners are, incredibly reasonable price for an intro psych textbook.
It is.
It could, an intro psych textbook retail could easily cost double or more than double that. If you don't have to believe me, just go to Amazon and Google Intro to Psych and see what the other 40 to 50 mainstream books are out there. It's a really, this market is so difficult to be successful in. Regan and I are actually doing, as we speak, a project about the history of introductory psychology textbooks, but specifically the chapter structure.
Fun. Yeah.
Starting, going back to actually before William James' 2-volume set, where he had 35 chapters.
Right.
And how it expands and contracts and expands and contracts. And, there's a Minot and Doherty 80s book that had, 40 chapters. And,
yeah.
It's kind of like, there's a Napoleon graphic somewhere that has the size of his army starting at 400,000, and then it comes down to about 50,000 at the end. And we're actually going to graph that out, and to see, how did we get to the standard, 16 chapter plus or minus one format. It's really been fun to kind of figure out the historical basis for how did we settle on the so-called 16 plus or minus one. So what was it like doing it? Can you just go into a little bit more detail about what it was like? And, do you have a favorite chapter that was so easy? And did you have, for example, when I teach intro psych, never taught motivation and emotion my entire career. 34 years in higher ed, never taught it. But I enjoy reading it.
Well, I got to tell you, my first challenge was that, as you know, for years, I've been speaking at psychology conferences about how we need to take another look at the intro psych course. And then here I am, having an opportunity to take another look at the intro psych course.
Now you got to walk the walk.
I got to walk the walk. I'm like, holy cow, I really dug myself into a hole here. So for those of you who have heard this intro psych talk that I've given, you know that I encourage us to think about our neighbors and to think about what our neighbors need to know about psychology. And I have to give Dave Myers credit on this, because years ago, I heard Dave give a talk, or he and I had a conversation where he said that he approaches his books thinking about what an educated person needs to know. And I really appreciated that, but that wasn't a specific enough audience for me. So I looked at who my neighbors were, and many of them had college degrees and were doing various things with their college degrees. And we know that intro psych is a popular course, so chances are pretty good that my neighbors had intro psych. So it's really thinking about what is it that my neighbors need to know, and that's how I approached this book. My wife, Verla, who's got degrees in English and library science, she was my in-house editor. And
well, that's helpful.
It was very helpful. And she was very aware of me going on and on about what our neighbors need to know about psychology. And so she'd be reading, and she would circle something, and she would write, "Do our neighbors need to know this?"
Wow. Nice.
And sometimes she was right. No, our neighbors do not need to know this. Delete. Even though it was a well-crafted paragraph. No matter, out it went. And other times I was able to defend it. Yeah, our neighbors need to know that. But then I had to write a little bit more about why this was important.
Well, what's really cool, and our listeners may not be aware of this, but maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, you and I got on a streak of organizing symposia at occasionally national, but mostly regional conventions of intro psych textbook authors. And one of the fun things about that is that the authors would speak for a little while, but then they'd open it up to the audience, because there is this mystique about intro psych textbooks. And may he rest in peace, Scott Lilienfeld, would tell this story about he wanted to take dark adaptation out of the sensation perception chapter. And, in this typical review of 25 reviewers in the next revision of one of his intro psych textbook revisions, one reviewer, I think he sent out a draft and he had taken it out of his proposed revision. And one reviewer wrote in, "How dare you take out dark adaptation?" And on page 323 in my latest revision, it's the foundation of psychological science. And the publisher panicked and made Scott, a well-renowned scientist, put it back in. And Scott tells this story, I think at WPA 7-8 years ago. And it's like, it's kind of what you and your wife did. Does your next door neighbor need to know about dark adaptation? Probably not. Do they need to know about positive and negative reinforcement? Those might be good ones because those are pervasive in our lives, whether we know the labels of those or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one place where I encountered this, the reviewers are going to want, came in the very first chapter. So in this particular textbook, the history of psychology is covered in the first chapter. And in psychology, we are enamored with our history. We just absolutely love our history, and it is fun and it's interesting, but my neighbors don't need to know it.
I would agree. I mean, I think psychologists enjoy it. Some do, but I think students rarely do.
Yeah.
And the context does matter. But if you were only going to remember if a student is going to have one exposure to psychology and they were going to take away 3 things from the course, or maybe 5, I don't think some historical fact about the backdrop of psychological science would be in those top 5.
When I first started teaching, I came across a quote that I have since lost, and I'm not sure that I ever knew who said it in the first place. And of course, I'm not going to be able to get it right. But the gist of it was, every time we choose to teach something, we're choosing not to teach something else. And that really got me. Because if I'm teaching that we only have X number of hours with our students, and our students only have X amount of time to absorb what it is we're giving them. So if they are learning this, what important thing is being excluded? So I absolutely had to keep that in mind as I was including and excluding stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and the classroom teacher needs to think about that as well. And I think a savvy teacher will take a textbook and use that in combination with what they do in class. So you can count on the textbook to cover certain things, and maybe in the classroom, I don't have to completely overlap. So I can cover or expound on or take a student interest level on a topic. And so chapter 14's got all this cool stuff on therapies. Well, but the students really keyed in on cognitive behavior therapy. I can take a deep dive that week and maybe go beyond what the textbook did or take a different slant. Let the textbook be the foundation, be the rock that has all the references and all the citations and all the good stuff. And I know that your book, I know that I read, you've got all the goodies, the PowerPoints, the instructor's manual, the text spec, all the bells and whistles, not bells or whistles. But then, why duplicate? Why lecture over the book almost? I don't know.
No, I agree completely. I think that an instructor's job is to figure out what their students are not getting, what they're not understanding, to identify what it is that they're most interested in, and to take their own knowledge of the topic and go beyond. I agree. Trust the students to use the textbook. And if students are not reading the textbook after the first exam, they will.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I do think I should counter that, it does depend on where you are in one's career. I think that when I was early in my career, I was probably lecturing straight out of the textbook and writing. They weren't PowerPoint slides, they were overhead transparencies. I was probably making my overhead straight out of textbook notes. Actually, and I've told this a couple of times on other podcasts, I wouldn't adopt the best book, the best intro psych book early in my career. I would adopt the second or third best book. But I had the best book for my lecture notes. And I would write my lecture notes, and I'm sorry to those early students, but that's what. And I was about half an hour ahead of them usually in terms of reading, because I was a brand new professor just trying to keep up. So,
and intro psych is absolutely the hardest course in our curriculum to teach.
Oh, I would agree with you. You have to be, if you want to be good at it, you have to be a generalist. I mean, obviously anyone who's a specialist can teach it, and they enjoy, if you're a developmental psychologist, you probably really enjoy teaching the developmental stuff, and that's probably the best thing for you to teach. But to teach it, the course well, you have to be able to be a generalist and understand a little bit of everything. Unfortunately, I never really understood motivation and emotion very well because I always skipped it. And in my model, I've always been in a semester system. So 15-week semester, 16-week book, a 16-chapter book, I usually taught a chapter a week. I'm not very creative. So I didn't skip around and say, read the first half of this chapter, read the last half of that chapter. I didn't do that. That was a chapter a week. One had to go. Motivation and emotion. Sorry, folks who love that one. Yeah.
Well, it is one of the chapters that is most likely to be kicked out. And I confess that, no, emotion and motivation was not a chapter that I taught either. But I have to revise the chapter. So I learned a lot about it and gained a whole new appreciation for it.
Right. So I'll stop intro psych talk here in a minute, but what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite? Do you have a pet? Just like you've got, how many dogs do you have at home now?
We have 3.
And do you have a favorite among the 3?
Yeah, but I'm not saying.
Okay, so back to the chapters.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite amongst how many chapters in the book?
There are 14.
Oh, 14. Look at you.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, or do you not want to say?
Oh, that's hard.
I know.
It's hard. I have a soft spot for research methods. And
so you're the one.
I'm the one. And what I actually do is, rather than jam it in the textbook, rather than jamming all research methods into one chapter, I do an introduction to correlation and experiments. And then throughout the rest of the book, I drop in stuff. So in the biopsych chapter, that's where I introduced the concept of placebos and how to use control groups in a randomized control trial. Someplace else, I talk about archival research, but it's in the context of whatever the topic is.
So it's almost like you make research methods a foundational structure of a pillar-like system.
It is almost like that, yes.
Okay.
Wonder where that came from.
I don't know. Some group you were once part of, and then you stepped away and left me.
If I were you, I would take it personally.
Okay. Wow. I'm leaving that in. I'm not editing that out. I want some of our friends to hear that. All right.
I also have a soft spot for sensation and perception, and
S&P.
Yeah, and I got to say, my background is social, but what I really like about sensation and perception came from some S&P folks who were kind enough to do some work for an STP presidential task force I was part of, and they came up with a handful of themes that they want everyone to know about sensation and perception. And one of those is that our view of the world is just a representation of the world. It's not actually the world. And students get blown away by that concept. And I think it's such an important one to know that not only are our views different, but actually how we see the world, physically see the world, is different.
So here's the thing, Sue. If And I've said this to a lot of people in a lot of conversations. If you have a way of capturing your excitement about those topics in writing in a book, I think this book will be very successful. I think it's really difficult to capture, for any instructor, for any writer, to capture the magic of what they do in the classroom in text form. So I hope you've been able to do that in your new textbook.
I hope I have been too. There are some serious challenges in doing that because, as you know, having heard many of my talks, humor is part of what I do. And humor in the written form is very, very hard.
Yeah, humor and sarcasm sometimes don't translate.
Yeah, sarcasm definitely not.
Yeah.
With emojis, you might be able to pull it off, but there are no, I take it back, there are 2 emojis in this textbook. But aside from that, humor was very difficult, but I hope I'm able to capture some of the excitement of intro psych.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So what else do you want to talk about? What else is going on? We talked a little bit about retirement. We talked about the textbook. We're here at ACT. Any surprises? Who have you seen here at ACT that you went, oh, wow, I haven't seen them in such a long time? Or any trends, any APA trends you're spotting? What's going on? What's the gossip? Do you have any?
What's the gossip?
Was it any good academic gossip you're willing to share?
Not that I'm willing to share.
Oh. But do you have some good ones?
Yeah, I've got some good ones.
Okay, but we can, after we turn, that's when we're off the air. Then.
Yeah, that's when we're off the air.
All right.
And anybody who wants to Venmo me, probably about $25, I'll share some of the good stuff.
Be careful here. Do you want to give your Venmo handle?
We can put it on the Psych Sessions website.
It could be part of the show notes here.
Yeah.
Or the Psych. Hey, by the way, we have a new Psych Sessions website. Thanks for mentioning that. I'll put it at psychsessions.org. We have a booth here at ACT for the first time. You should go by and spin the wheel.
I haven't been down there yet, so I will definitely do that.
Awesome. What else is going on?
What else is going on? Well, so right now I'm in the middle of revising a social psych textbook.
Hello. When were you going to mention that?
Right after we were done talking about intro.
Oh, okay. So it's book talk with Sue Frantz.
It is. So halfway through that, hopefully that will be available come January, February 2024.
And are you the single author?
Chuck Stangor also wrote this social text.
So is he collaborating at all, or is he kind of out of the picture on these?
He is happily retired and is not collaborating. He looked at some of the first chapter or 2 in the intro text and told the publisher, yeah, that all looks good.
We're in an era right now where a lot of our colleagues have to be thinking about the future of their books. Like Dave Myers did this years ago with Nathan DeWall, and he's done this now with his social psych textbook. No, that's okay. But I mean, I know a lot of our colleagues, especially intro psych authors who might have been single authors, are now adding the second. And I do know that normally there's a plan in place where there's a flip of the authors because, you want that intellectual property to continue in perpetuity. And then it's nice. And it's nice that an estate can then have a little bit of money for some time, and then whoever takes it on. Phil Zimbardo, when he came on to his intro psych textbook, he was a second or third author with, I think, Charles Roux. I never say his name correctly. It's Rook. It looks like Rook, R-U-C-H, but I believe it's Roux.
Uh-huh.
It was Roux and Zimbardo and I think another third author, but now Phil Zimbardo's first. So it just makes good sense. So this is what you're going to do in retirement, or I'm sorry, air quotes for people who obviously no one can see me. The air quotes retirement. You're going to revise other people's books and make them your own.
Well, just 2.
For now.
Well, I rejected a third. I had a third author.
From Stangor? What other third book?
Well, there was a third offer for a human sexuality text.
That he wrote?
No, somebody else.
Okay.
And I decided, no, 2 textbooks is enough.
For now? But you're going to get bored.
Well, it's going to be a little while because we have 1 more year, so we make it through 2023. And then sometime in early 2024, it's going to be time to start revising the intro text again.
Well, there you go. You know, the minute it's out the door, you're already taking notes on the revisions and what studies you want to go to the next one.
Oh, not even out the door. I've got, so my revisions the biggest revisions on the intro text were done back in February or March of 2022.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But so tell me a little bit about the social psych textbook.
So social psych, I don't know if there's much to say. It's 13 chapters, and I'm on chapter 8 right now.
And so it was it also with Flat World?
It was, yeah.
Okay, and so he wrote it as an OER.
Yes, that was also OER to start. Mm-hmm.
And the intro, I think I noticed it was 4th edition or 4th version.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the social psych? What version had it been through with him?
I am pretty sure the social psych text is going into its 3rd.
But did Flat World pay him some sort of fee to write it first?
I have no idea.
See, because that's one of my concerns about OER is the sustainability.
It's not sustainable. That's correct.
Yeah. And so I don't think it is. I think other people think it is. And and that's probably another conversation for a good conversation for another day. But so something tripped for me that I want to ask you about. You're revising one now, maybe 2 books at a time simultaneously. I'll bet you have a system. I'll bet you have a software or hardware system for tracking your articles, tracking your revisions. I'll bet okay, all right, that laughter tells me you know what I'm excited about right now. I'll bet you've got a system. Would you share it with our listeners? Or is it proprietary?
It's proprietary, yeah, that's right.
You don't want to give it away to other textbook revisers and writers.
Well, all right. So there are 2. So I'm kind of waffling on which one to use, and part of the time I started off using Trello. So I created a Trello board for each book, and a different list for each chapter, and a different card for each journal article or New York Times article or whatever that I came across. Well, what I discovered is that, 1, those lists were getting really long, and 2, it was a little bit inconvenient because almost all of the content that I am consuming is coming through a feed reader. So I use Innovator, I-N-O reader.
I use that, probably on your recommendation.
Probably. And so I've been using tags. So I've got stuff that comes in from, I don't know, Journal of the American Medical Association. And I'm like, oh, here's something really interesting on stress. So I just attach a tag that says either I text or S text with whatever the chapter name is. So when I'm ready to revise that chapter, I can just go in and look at those tags, scroll through. It'll be a lot of content, but at least it's still in the same thing as opposed to having to send it from my newsreader out to Trello, create a new card. Do I want to duplicate cards with tags? It's easy to select multiple chapters.
I'm a bit surprised you're not using OneNote.
I don't use OneNote for this.
Okay.
I use OneNote for taking notes at conferences and such.
Okay.
But not for this.
So you've made Trello work for you.
Not so much Trello for tracking stuff I want to do with books because the content is just so much. I use Trello for lots of other things. I use Trello to keep track of changes I want to make in my own courses.
Okay.
So if I want to bring a new example into intro psych, for instance, in the social psych chapter, I'll drop that into my Trello board.
So with all the textbook revisions and everything else, Technology for Educators, your blog, probably not a lot of posts lately.
Yeah, sorry about that for everybody who.
First off, you don't have to. If you're
for everybody,
audience,
yeah.
I guessing how busy you are. That's okay. Yeah, I'm not on Twitter a lot, so I think that's where I saw those announcements when they came up.
I've got about 1,000 people who are subscribed to the blog, so they just get an email when a new blog post goes up. But yeah, a lot of my energy right now is in the textbook arena and not in the technology arena. One of the things that I've stepped away from at my college, now that I'm partly retired, is I was attached as a faculty in residence to our educational technology department for about 10 years. So I had plenty of motivation to keep up with what was going on.
Well, and I think there's a good message in there is that when you want to do something, you have to start saying no to some other things. So to make the bandwidth to do this thing that you're clearly passionate about, your 2 books that you're working on right now, you had to say no to the Technology for Educators blog, or at least say no more often to it. And I'm sure that when you come across something really great that you're going to use, you might stop and write a blog post about it because you're just knee deep in it. But, saying no to certain things that you've been doing for a while allows you to say yes to a book opportunity and then another book opportunity. Yeah.
And I'm still doing consulting around technology, as you know.
I do.
And my plan is that after the social psych text has been revised, I'm going to start work on a book called Technology for Academics, What Students and Their Professors Need to Know.
It makes really good sense. And, immediately what I think of is that is a book that will need an annual or biannual revision because it will be always need to be updated. The year you publish it, 18 to 24 months later, you'll need the next edition.
Some of the content, though, will be fine. I don't want to immediately turn people off to buying a book before it's even been written, let alone published, with, oh no, there's no point in doing this because it's just going to change. But some of the content will remain the same. So, for instance, learning about things like security, that if you're at the coffee shop and you're connected to the public Wi-Fi, that you should use a private VPN.
Right.
So then the recommendations for the VPNs are going to change and how you connect to them, that's going to change. But the fact that people should be doing that isn't going to change.
Well, and it might be that the book is a basic standard, but maybe the book is connected to a website, and the website could give the up-to-date, here are the top 5 VPNs, and that you could give the website could be fluid, and the book could be more static.
Could be.
Yeah. All right.
I'll talk that over with a publisher once I have one.
Okay. By the way, and I don't want any finder's fee for that, but did Doug Bernstein get a finder's fee? I mean, what a nice, generous thing for him to do. You don't need to answer that. It's none of my damn business. Sue, we're just about out of time. Anything that you wanted to talk about that I haven't hit on, or anything you wanted to mention? Anything on your hit list, your hit parade?
Boy, is there anything else?
What did I forget? Or something you're working on that you're excited about? Or
Well, at home, I finally had to print out a little piece of paper where I included everything that I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and you had to go buy more paper.
Well, I use a small font, and I've got it taped to my monitor at home, and I wish I would have taken a picture of it because I can't keep all of that in my head.
That's right.
And part of that, too, is, just being generally tired. But it's all good stuff. Not complaining about any of it. I've got a fantastic home office and a wonderful in-house editor.
Very rarely do the snakes get into the home office, so that's a good thing.
We've only had 2 rattlesnakes in the last year and a half.
Only 2 sounds...
Only 2.
Sounds like a pretty good ratio, one every 6 months. Yeah.
Well, it was a year... Yeah, it was almost 2 years, and we're now past rattlesnake season, so I'm pretty confident we're not going to have another rattlesnake before next summer.
All right. So you can either the axe or the shotgun, whatever thing you need to do to protect the homestead, you got to protect the homestead.
I keep the doors closed.
That seems much less violent. That's a good choice. I don't know where I was going. The Wild West and New Mexico. I think I had a John Wayne movie in my head. I'm sorry. I went there. Garth, that's an edit point. Or not. Leave it in. Sue, thanks for your time today. I know you've got 84 people who want to see you today at this conference, and I always appreciate time with you.
It's always a pleasure, Eric.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.